Yeah, good morning. Greetings from Paraguay. We're talking today about Jezebel and the way Jezebel built a religious and a governmental system in the land of Israel that controlled the entire nation. She was able to gain control of the political system, of the king, of the elders, of the military, and she also gained control of the religious system. She had a network of priests and prophets of Baal and the priests of Asherah. And using this governmental and religious system, she ruled the land of Israel, and she gained control over the entire nation. And it became dangerous to worship the true God. It became dangerous to worship Yahweh. And she had the prophets of Yahweh hunted down and murdered. So we're going to talk about that, how she builds this system of control. Jezebel hates legitimate authority. And when we talk of legitimate authority, we're talking about authority that operates within God-given limits. For example, a man has authority over his household. A man is responsible to protect his family. He's responsible to provide for his family. He has authority in the family. He's responsible to discipline his children. In my own life, I remember when I got married, my father came to me and he had two scriptures in mind. And he said, "Vaughn, the Bible says children obey your parents." And he said, "Vaughn, the Bible also says honor your father and mother that your days may be long." And what he said to me, he said, "Vaughn, you always need to honor me. You always honor your father and mother. But," he said, "from this day you're getting married and you're no longer a child. The Bible says children obey." He says, "You no longer need to obey me. My authority is limited. You're becoming a man. You're responsible to make your own decisions. You no longer need to obey me. Even though you honor me, you no longer need to obey me." And I tell that story just to explain the limits of a father's authority. A father cannot control his child through his entire life. The child needs to take responsibility for his own life and make his own choices. The authority of a father comes from God, but it is limited. It has certain limits. As you become an adult, the authority of your father falls away, and you're responsible for your own decisions. In the same way, the authority of a government, the authority of a national government, has limits. Romans 13 verse 4 speaks about the authority of a government. It says, "The authorities are God's servants sent for your good. But if you're doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong." And it also says they don't bear the sword in vain. In other words, the government is given a sword to punish evildoers. A government is responsible to protect its citizens. It is responsible to protect its citizens from invading armies. It's responsible to protect its citizens from criminals. It's given a sword to do that. That's its job. It's supposed to protect it. Just as a father is supposed to protect his family, under the law, if someone broke into your house and the father killed him, it wasn't murder. The father was doing his job. He was protecting his family. In the same way, the government is responsible to use the sword to protect its citizens. It's given a certain job to do. It's given a certain authority. What does Jezebel do? She tries to cause that governmental authority to go beyond its limits. She tries to cause the king to take the place of God. And that's why in Jezebel's system, if you spoke against the king, you were committing blasphemy against God because the king had taken the place of God. And that's why Naboth was accused of blaspheming against God and the king. So she tries to cause the governmental authority to go beyond its God-given limits and to take the place of God in a land. She tries to build a religious system and to use the authority of government to make everyone bow down to those idols. Jezebel hates authority that does its job and stays in its limits. She hates the authority of a father who knows what he's given by God to do and says, this is my family. I'm going to love this family. I'm going to provide for this family. I'm going to protect this family. She hates authority that resists her control. She wants authority that is completely under her control and authority that goes beyond its God-given limits. And that's the system that she builds. Jezebel is actually the system builder. In Israel, she built a system that controlled the whole land. She built a system around her idols. She built a system where she controlled the government, she controlled the religion, she controlled the king, she controlled the elders, she controlled everybody. She's a system builder. If we look at this world and say, how does the devil rule this world? To a very large degree, the devil uses systems to rule this world. There's worldwide systems that control much of the world. One of these systems would be the system of communism. Another one of these systems would be the system of Islam. And in these systems, there's no separation between church and state. For example, in Islam, you have the religious system of Islam and the governmental system of Islam, and the two are combined together. And if you speak against the religion, the governmental system will come and have you put in jail or have you killed. In the same way, in communism, the state takes the place of God. It almost becomes a religion of its own. And if you speak against the state, you're committing blasphemy against God, because the state has taken the place of God. And if you even criticize the communist government, you're likely to be killed or taken off to a slave labor camp. When you really look at these systems, every system has 5 parts. First of all, every system has an idol. And the idol is something that takes the place of God and demands to be worshiped. And this can be either a governmental system or a religious system. Either way, there's something in that system that takes the place of God and demands to be worshiped. So in Islam, you have the man Muhammad, who's the perfect man. You have the Quran, which is the perfect book. It was written before the earth was created. And this man and this book take the place of God, and they become idols in the center of the system. You also have a temple in Saudi Arabia, and every Muslim bows down towards that temple 5 times a day. And in the center of the temple, you have a black stone, and you're supposed to go to Saudi Arabia and march around that black stone and kiss that black stone. And this temple was an old house full of idols. Muhammad removed the idols, but he kept the temple, and he said, everybody bow down to the temple. If you look at the communist system, the idol would be the Communist Party itself that takes the place of God. And it's almost worshipped. In Russia, under communist times, you had the tombs of Lenin, where people would go and basically worship before the tomb of Lenin, because he was the God in the center of the system. The wisdom of Lenin took the place of God. Every system has an idol. Number 2, every system has a priesthood. And the priesthood are those who protect the idol, and they tell you how to worship the idol. So in the system of Islam, the priesthood would be the imams, the religious leaders. And if you don't properly worship the idol, if you don't give proper worship to the Quran and to Muhammad, the priesthood are the ones who would try to kill you. In the system of communism, the priesthood would be the officials who are listening to what everyone says. And if you say one word against communism, or one word against the president, or one word against the supreme leader, these are the guys that will try to have you killed. The priesthood protects the idol and tells you how to worship the idol. As we already talked about, the Bible talks of the rulers of the darkness of this age. That behind the scenes, it talks of evil rulers in the spiritual realms. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against the spiritual armies of wickedness in the heavenly places. Every system has evil spiritual rulers. behind the scenes, behind what you see with your eyes, behind the religion that you see, behind the governmental system that you see, there are spiritual forces that empower the system. There are rulers. The Bible calls them princes, calls them rulers, calls them gods. There's evil spiritual beings that empower the entire system. Every system has evil spiritual rulers. There are spiritual forces behind the system of communism. There are evil spiritual rulers that control the system of Islam. There's evil spiritual rulers that control every system in this world. Every system has an idol. Every system has a priesthood. Every system has evil spiritual rulers. Every system has covenants. And when we talk of covenant, the covenant is what connects the people to the system and connects the people to the evil spiritual rulers. The first mention of covenant is actually found in Genesis. Jesus spoke about this covenant. He said, "A man shall leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." So when we speak of blood covenant, we're talking about two becoming one. We're talking about two people being connected, becoming one. Every system has these connections. Every system has these covenants that connect the people to the system and to the evil spiritual rulers. In the marriage covenant that Jesus talked about, he said, "A man will leave his father and mother, be united with his wife, the two shall become one flesh." Of course, the female body is created in such a way that when a woman has sexual intercourse for this first time, there's blood. You might say, why is there blood? It's a sign of a covenant. It's a sign of a blood covenant. It's a sign that two people are being joined together in a holy covenant. And of course, marriage was created by God. God's the one who said it's not good that a man should be alone. God is the one who connected Adam and Eve together in covenant to love and serve each other for a lifetime. Marriage is a holy covenant. The devil understands covenant. He understands that in covenant, two become one and they become connected. And he uses sexual intercourse to connect people to his system and to his rulers. Actually, when you read the Old Testament of the Bible, when you read about people worshiping Baal and worshiping Asherah, there's two things you find again and again and again all through the Bible that the devil uses to connect people to himself in covenant. The Bible always speaks again and again of meat that is sacrificed to idols, animals that are sacrificed to idols, and sexual immorality. These are the two primary forms of covenant: blood sacrifices and sexual immorality. And so in the Old Testament days, if you wanted to worship Baal, you went to the temple of Baal. And there in the temple, there would be sacrifices made to Baal. Perhaps they sacrificed a goat, and then they took that goat and they had a big barbecue in the temple. And people would be invited to the temple to eat the goat that had been sacrificed to Baal. And as they eat the meat of that goat that had been offered to Baal, as they ate the meat of that sacrifice, they are forming a blood covenant. They are connecting themselves to Baal. In a blood covenant, two become one. As they eat that goat, they're saying, we belong to Baal. He is our God. We are his people. We are one. We belong to his system. We belong to the idol. That's why the Bible speaks again and again of meat sacrificed to idols. And again, people are warned not to take part in it. And of course, there was something else in those temples. In the temple of Baal, there were prostitutes. And when you wanted to worship Baal, you went to the temple of Baal and you had sexual relations with a prostitute who functioned as a priest or a priestess of Baal. And as you had sexual relations with the priestess of Baal, or the priest, you were forming a covenant between yourself and Baal, and you're saying, I belong to Baal. In the marriage covenant, two become one. And as I have sexual relations with this priest of Baal, I'm connecting myself. I'm becoming one with Baal. He becomes my God, and we become his people. And so all through the Bible, you find these covenants, these blood covenants. When you speak of a blood covenant costs your life. It costs you everything. Everything you have is joined with your covenant partner. In marriage costs your life. You give your life for your children. A man gives his life. He works every day for his family. A mother works every day laying down her life for her husband and for her family. It costs you everything you have. And in the same way, when you form a blood covenant, everything you have belongs to your covenant partner. And so when you eat the meat that's been sacrificed to Baal, when you have sexual relations with the prostitute that represents Baal, everything you have is given to Baal. You're fully connected to the idol. You're fully connected to the evil religious system. And you'll find these covenants in every system. Every system has an idol. Every system has a priesthood. Every system has evil spiritual rulers that empower the system. And every spirit system has covenants. So if you look at Islam, for example, once a year, every Muslim is expected to sacrifice a sheep in the festival of the sacrifice, Eid al-Adha. And Muslims are also expected to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. And when they get there, they're expected to have a sacrifice, to sacrifice an animal. On the third day of the Hajj, every pilgrim must sacrifice an animal or buy a voucher for the sacrifice of an animal on his behalf. In other words, every Muslim has to offer blood sacrifices. And of course, the reason that they give for this, they say that the reason you need to sacrifice a sheep once a year is to remember the Bible story of when Abraham was given a sheep to sacrifice instead of his son. And they say to remember that story, every Muslim must sacrifice a sheep once a year. But that's not the real reason. The real reason why every Muslim needs to sacrifice a sheep once a year is to connect them in blood covenant to the system, to connect every Muslim in blood covenant to the evil spiritual rulers and to the idol. That's the real reason for the sacrifices. That every Muslim is connected in covenant to the system of Islam. His life is given to that system. That's why it's very difficult for a Muslim to leave the Islamic system. And if you study all the systems, you'll find different forms of covenant. You'll find different forms of sacrifice. Number 5, every system has lies. The central lie is about the idol, where the idol pretends to be God. Muhammad is the perfect man, and the Quran is the holy book. Every system is full of lies. Lies about God, lies about what is right, lies about what is wrong. Evil is called good. Good is called evil. These are systems of darkness. These are systems that keep the world in darkness. When you're in such a system, you don't know what is right and you don't know what is wrong. When you're part of such a system, you can't see clearly. You have no way of knowing the true God. All you can see is your idol. All you can see is the thing that pretends to be God. And you get a very confused view of who God is. In other words, if you're a Muslim and you're following Muhammad, well, Muhammad raped and stole and lied and murdered. And he did so and said that he's doing these things under instruction from God. If you're following Muhammad as a perfect man, and you think that he's the light, he's the example, he's the one who shows you the righteousness of God, then you have no idea who God is. And you have no idea about the righteousness of God. Jesus said, if the light that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? If the thing that you're following that is teaching you righteousness is actually darkness, and the one you're following is actually an evil spiritual ruler, how great is that darkness? That's how these systems work. Every system has an idol. it has a priesthood, it has evil spiritual rulers, it has blood covenants, and it has lies. And when you're part of that system, you can't see, you can't hear, you're separated from the true God, and you're separated from the righteousness of God. If we speak about Jezebel, Jezebel built a system in Israel. At the center of the system, you had the idol. You had the idols of Baal, you had the idols of Asherah. And everyone had to worship the idols of Baal and the idols of Asherah. Secondly, she had a priesthood. She had prophets of Baal, 450 prophets of Baal and 400 priests of Asherah. And this priesthood protected the idol and told people how to worship the idol. Behind the scenes, you had the evil spiritual rulers, the forces of darkness that empowered the entire system. You had covenants. The worship of goddesses in those days always involved sexual perversion. It always involved temple prostitutes. It always involved sexual covenants as you went to the temple and had sexual relations with the high priest, the high priestesses. And secondly, it always had blood sacrifices. And in the case of Jezebel's system, these were human sacrifices. The Phoenicians offered their own children as blood sacrifices to Baal. And they put their ashes into clay pots, and they wrote on the pots, "Thanks be to Baal who has blessed us." In other words, the sacrifices at the center of the system that connected the people to the system were blood sacrifices, were the sacrifices of their own children. And as they gave their own children, they were saying, all that we have belongs to Baal. He is our God, we are his people. Even our own children, we will sacrifice to him. And number 5, the system that she built was full of lies. The central lie was that Baal was God and that Asherah was the mother goddess. There were many other lies. A good man, Elijah, was called the troubler of Israel. King Ahab said to Elijah, "Oh, you troubler of Israel." And of course, Elijah was the one who was trying to save Israel. And we also read about the lies about Naboth, where Naboth was falsely accused and said, "Naboth, you've blasphemed God and the king." In other words, in this system, good men were falsely accused and lied about, and evil men took the place of God and were worshipped. This is the system that Jezebel built in Israel. And when we talk about the battle for America today, Jezebel is building a system. At the center of the system is an idol. There's a priesthood that protects the idol. There's evil spiritual rulers that empower her new system. There's covenants, blood sacrifices that connect the American people to Jezebel's idol. And finally, there is just a river of lies to control the nation. When we talk about the battle for America, we're not just talking about an election. We're talking about a system that is being built to control this nation. And when this system is built, there won't be any freedom of speech or freedom of religion. There won't be any freedom of worship. You won't be allowed to assemble. You won't be allowed to do what you want to do. The nation will come under the control of this evil spirit. It will come under the control of Jezebel, and she will bring the nation into deep bondage and deep darkness. We're going to talk about this battle for our nation as this series continues. Thank you.